Silver Palace has had its first beta test, and it sure did leave an impression. The beauty of its world, creativity behind its character designs, and the implementation of its action combat have left me more than pleased. The last one in particular is what has really drawn me in. Silver Palace takes a mishmash of mechanics we've seen in other games like entry skills, executes, and even attribute anomalies, and mixes it into a very addicting formula that feels fulfilling to engage with and rewards player skill expression. So let's have a look at the 3 hardest encounters in the game, talk about the fundamental game mechanics that one needs to keep in mind, and then break down exactly why I played the way I did. After all, it turns out that there's a lot of depth to this game.
Up and ready to roast. Out of my way.
Youthful folly!
Your death is insignificant. Flamethrower ready. That was close. We do this together! Flamethrower ready!
Want some more, do ya? Youthful folly!
Enemies! Beg me for mercy! Your death is insignificant! Here comes a fire!
A waste of strength.
Coming right up! Super duper ultra crescent boomerang! Burn it all fueled up and ready to roast. Out of my way. Fools belong in hell. How does it feel to be stomped on by an ant? All fueled up and ready to roast. insignificant. You got what you deserve. Oh, guilty is charged. We're perfect for each other. You got what you deserve. I am guilty as charged. We're perfect for each other. Coming right up! Super Duper Ultra Crescent Boomerang! Here comes the fire! Flamethrower ready! That was close! Enemies. Give up already! Fools belong in hell!
Stop! Youthful folly! You'll never learn! Rat!
No one bullies my detective! Get ready, people! We do this together! Burn it all down! Out of my way! Beg me for mercy! Your death is insignificant! What's broken has been mended.
Let's keep those brats in check, and then we'll get to have our vacation in peace.
The striped one is very smart, but that grumpy royal blue looks just like you. Which one should I name? Explosion? There's no bombs here. Only flour and a torch gun.
To understand what's going on in these fights, it's probably worth going over how the core combat mechanics of the game work. We can start with Silverdrip and the Reactor. At the bottom of the screen you find the character's health bar to the left, their unique resource or mechanic to the right, and in the center is the Reactor gauge. All damaging actions in the game will generate some amount of Silverdrip, which you can see as faint, ghostly drops of energy on the ground. These linger for a small amount of time, only to then be automatically absorbed by the reactor, building it up. No need to walk over to it. You can tell that there's Silverdrip on field by a lightly pulsing white glow on the reactor, which then quickly fills up when Silverdrip is absorbed, being converted into reactor energy. Once the reactor fills up in full, it will grant one ambush point, showing up as a glowing triangle above the gauge. Swapping to any character while there are ambush points in stock will consume 1 point and cause them to use an ambush skill. These are usually very strong attacks, with each character having a unique skill, usually being important to their kits. The detective, for example, builds up a unique resource very quickly with it, and using the ambush skill also gives her a buff that increases her skill's damage by 72%. Even if the character in question doesn't personally gain much from the ambush skill, it's still very much worth doing, because gear in this game revolves around it. Motive is a primary gear system for characters. These are cars that can be leveled up and provide significant stat boosts, always having some flat attack value alongside secondary attributes, be it attack percent, ultimate charge rate, HP percent, or resonance related stats, which we'll touch on in a bit. These are split into individual classes with Hero, Guardian, and Witness types, with an additional effect only being applied when a character with a matching class uses them. The important thing to note here is that hero-type motives, being the class for main damage dealers, demand ambush skills to be used for their additional effects, like attack percent or resonance boosts. This is further exacerbated by catalysts, an alternate gearing system. As you progress through the game and level up your account, you'll gain catalysts that provide special effects when equipped. The more catalysts you equip on a given character, the higher their cost, limiting how many you can use. They don't need to be upgraded, but managing which character gets which catalyst and how many catalysts goes to a given character does matter. Each character has 3 slots, and all catalysts will only provide some kind of boost after using an ambush skill, making their use very important for maximum buff uptime. The last type of gear in the game are Silvercrafts, items that can be found and collected in the open world. They have their own set of stats and will provide buffs upon striking enemies, which happen automatically with a fixed cooldown. Unfortunately, they aren't all that important, as Silvercrafts are only present in the open world, with endgame modes either having a separate Silvercraft system or not having them at all. Aside from gearing, resonance is one of the primary ways of increasing character damage. Much like how every character has a class, they also have an element. Having 1, 2, or 3 characters of a given element in a team will increase the resonance level that can be inflicted upon enemies. With 1 character of a given element, it's possible to build up to 1 resonance, which does absolutely nothing. With 2 characters of a given element, it's possible to build up to 3 resonance. At 2 stacks or above, an attribute anomaly will be inflicted, a sort of special effect, like a damage over time burn for the Ignis element. With 3 characters of a given element, it's possible to build up to 5 resonance, and when said 5 stacks are reached, a burst of damage will take place, often far out damaging any skill in a character's kit. How exactly all of this builds and scales is unclear. There is a resonance burst stat, which is meant to influence the damage of attribute anomalies, and the 5 stack burst damage, but whether it's snapshots or how it balances different characters with different stat values is unclear. Considering that the resonance inflictions decay with time, it's difficult to test. There's also resonance efficiency and build-up rate, but how each differs from another isn't evident either. The one thing that is certain is how obscenely strong the 5-stack resonance anomaly damage is, often being the single highest source of damage in a fight. There is one other resonance effect, giving a significant final damage boost to a whole team when 3 different elements are used. This sounds very strong, but unfortunately, it pales in comparison to the damage from attribute anomalies and a 5-stack burst. Building up resonance for said anomalies and burst isn't all that hard either. Every damaging move used by a character will build it. This can be their regular attacks, skills, automates, and even parries. Talking about parries, we should cover them. When enemies attack, you can dodge. This gives a brief window of invulnerability, and in some characters' case, double dodging can have unique effects, like doing damage. Dodges are tied to stamina, which is tracked by a circular gauge at the bottom right. The more you dodge, the more it drains. Once it's fully drained, characters can still dodge and still get invulnerability from it, but lose their double dodge effects and cover significantly smaller distances. Distinct from stamina though are parries, which can be done simply by pressing the dodge button at the precise time an enemy is due to attack. Alternatively, swapping to a character with the correct timing will also parry with the incoming character, but only if there aren't any ambush points in stock. Not all moves are parryable, with whether one is or isn't being indicated by a yellow or red flash respectively. Parries, unlike dodges, also do not negate all damage. It's strange that perfectly timing a dodge means you lose health when you otherwise wouldn't, but still, it's often worth doing. Parries count as attacks, dealing damage, applying attribute anomalies, and most importantly, generating a lot of Silverdrip. As we've covered before, that's pretty important. They also build Stagger, albeit not much. And Stagger is a pretty big deal. All enemies have a Stagger meter. While this is filling up, attacks will slowly build up vulnerability stacks on the enemy, tracked by a percentage number. This caps out at 200%, with different characters and different moves having their own distinct build-up values. Such values unfortunately aren't specified anywhere in this beta test, so figuring out the application rate for each came down to experimentation. The important thing about vulnerability is that regardless of how high it is, it does not apply to the enemy by default. Damage remains the same even as it builds up. Even when the Stagger meter is built up in full and the enemy enters a stun state, it's still not active, with damage remaining the same. During this stun state, however, enemies will not move or attack and can also be executed, where the active character deals a highly damaging finishing attack. While doing the attack, game timers will slow down, as will the stun decay rate, until the skill ends. It's only after executing that the vulnerability multiplier is applied. Executes also do a lot of damage and are some of the highest sources of Silverdrip in the game. Although different characters have different execute animations, the cooldown for it is shared, being tracked by a circular gauge at the bottom right of the screen. Unfortunately, it is not possible to see its skill values nor level it up, with all other information pertaining to it being hidden in this beta test. Once the stun state ends, rather than returning to normal with the Stagger meter resetting, you're placed in a stun recovery state. During this state, Stagger cannot be built, with the meter slowly decaying from 100 to 0%. In this stun recovery, vulnerability still applies, but enemies are definitively not stunned. They can and will both move and attack, making it harder to capitalize on the damage increase. From there, everything returns to normal, with vulnerability resetting to a baseline of 100% and Stagger be able to be built again. That about covers the core combat systems in Silver Palace. Attack enemies to generate Silverdrip, which is then converted to Reactor energy with some delay. Once the reactor fills up, ambush points are built, which can then be spent on ambush skills to enable characters' unique mechanics and activates effects from gear, namely motives and catalysts. As you deal damage to enemies or parry their attacks, a matching element resonance gauge will build, the stagger meter slowly fills up, and vulnerability increases. Once stagger maxes out, enemies are stunned, being unable to act, with player executions unlocked for a short period and vulnerability applying at the cast. After which, enemies enter a stun recovery state, where they will attack again and cannot be staggered, but vulnerability still applies until the stagger gauge expires. Then rinse and repeat, being mindful of resources, gear effects, and character kits. On the topic, let's talk about characters, because they follow a similar template but are still distinct in their own ways. Each character has a basic attack string, being the most accessible move. Holding the basic attack button will lead to a charge attack, with the longer the hold, the higher the charge, leading to more damage and, at times, different effects. Cinderella, for example, will knock back enemies with charge level 1, which is then changed to an AoE at charge level 2. An important thing to note is that swapping characters usually interrupts their attacks. If doing so during a charged attack, however, they aren't interrupted and will proceed to cast it in full. Then there's Pursuit Attacks, which is an alternate basic attack accessible by pressing an attack after a dodge or if far away from the enemy. Then there are skills. Each one is unique to a character. Often they are related to projectiles. The Detective will shoot her pistol, Alf will aim and fire her shotgun, Argos will charge up his cane gun, and Cynthia will pull and release her slingshot. Some characters though are melee only. Lauren will uppercut with his skill, while Bertha will drain her health for a buff and parry. As mentioned before, ambush attacks are also a thing, accessible by swapping to a character when there is a Reactor's ambush point in stock. And lastly, ultimates. Doing attacks of any kind will build up ultimate energy, tracked by a filling icon on the bottom right of the screen. The currently active character gets the most, but about a third to half of ultimate energy build is shared to all other party members too. In addition to active skills, each character has a passive that tends to play into their skill and unique resources. As characters level up, it's possible to increase their methods. Mastering a method will often increase an attack's level, but it can also have other effects, like bestowing permanent stat bonuses. With this, we've gone over more or less all of the key mechanics pertaining to combat, so let's put everything together and see how it all plays out. For the showcases, I used an Ignis team. This comprises of Cinderella, the main damage dealer, Lauren, for quick stagger build, Cynthia, the support, and Alf, who works as a secondary damage dealer, stunner, and support. As a quick overview of their mechanics, Cinderella's basic attack, be it the regular or charged versions, are very weak. Her skill even more so, being a ranged attack that does pitiful damage and builds up her overheat meter, which when full, prevents her from firing altogether. However, once using her ultimate, she enters the quenched state for 15 seconds. During this state, she gains an absurd amount of resonance burst and both her basic attack and skill are enhanced, doing a lot more damage. Now her basic attacks also build overheat, and once it's maxed out, rather than locking her out of her skill, using it will deal a high damaging explosion and unlock an alternative ultimate. When it comes to gearing, she's outfitted with the Riddle of the Other Half motive, giving her attack percent bonuses on using ambush skills and dealing damage, stacking up to 6 times. As for catalysts, it's Vulcan Ash, usable only on 3 Ignis character teams and giving 1 Silverdrip up to twice per second. Alkali, a 12% death shred when using executions, and Galena, putting 1% crit rate with every attack for 8 seconds for up to 7 stacks total. Lauren is the only non-Ignis unit of the team, being a primary on-fielder. His basic attack isn't all that strong, and although he has a charged attack, it's quite slow. None of this matters, however, as Lauren isn't here for damage. He has a special dodge where instead of parrying, timing his dodge will lead to a sway, building up his unique resource. Said unique resource can be consumed when full to unleash an uppercut that builds a ridiculous amount of stagger and ultimate energy. As he uppercuts, he gets a stacking buff that increases his damage, being even stronger on his ultimate. His motive is Riddle of Richness, reducing enemy defense by up to 10% for 40 seconds, and his catalyst is Asphaltnium, a minor but appreciated 6% damage bonus. Cynthia is a dedicated Ignis support. This is because her passive can reduce enemy Ignis resistance by 2% with every hit for 40 seconds, stacking 5 times. On top of that, she can use Riddle of Daydreaming, a witness motive that further reduces enemy Ignis resistance by 1% with every hit for 40 seconds, stacking 10 times. All combined, this is a 20% resistance shred. This is further boosted by her skill, which uses up her unique resource to charge up her slingshot. Immediately releasing it does little, but fully charging it releases a special candy shot that applies a 12% vulnerability modifier for 40 seconds, all the while dealing multiple hits. She can also apply the vulnerability with her charge attack, which consumes the skill gauge, but it only applies 8%, so worse than her charge skill. And her basic attack is very underwhelming. Although it can be used to charge her unique resource quickly, it isn't really needed. Stalling with her ultimate tends to be better instead, being a wide range AoE that pulls in enemies and has a high interrupt level, locking them down and making it easier for allies to strike. As for her catalyst, she uses Stone, granting resilience, effectively a defense stat, and a shield to party members that scales with her current HP, as well as Tin, a reliable team-wide heal that also scales with her current HP. Lastly is Alf, a multi-purpose unit. Her whole shtick is building up resonance quickly, and given how absurdly hard it hits, means that she helps in dealing damage. Her unique resources are various types of ammo. Shotgun shells, accessed by her main skill, Buckshot, her level 2 charged basic attack, usable by consuming shotgun shells, and Flamethrower Fuel, her ultimate. Hitting an enemy with each type of ammo will give her an independent stacking damage buff, but that isn't really all that desirable. Alf's main purpose, aside from being needed for the 3 Ignis resonance effect, is to stagger and build up vulnerability. Shotgun shells build a lot of both, in addition to having high resonance application values and ultimate energy recovery rates. Her ultimate also builds a lot of stagger, vulnerability, and resonance, with the added bonus of generating a lot of Silverdrip and giving her 4 reserve ammo, which can then be used to quickly reload her shotgun shells. By mixing up her ambush skill, shotgun shells, and ultimate, she can tag team with Lauren while out of stun to set up a high damaging burst. As for her gear, the Riddle of Curiosity motive gives a sizable increase to her resonance burst stat. This is further enhanced by the Nitric Acid Catalyst, giving even more resonance burst, and Lead, giving resonance level increase efficiency on ultimate use. With all this in mind, a team rotation starts to fall, so let's break down how I routed the Cinderella fight to see how it all comes together. To start with, we want to be on Cynthia. Getting her multiple debuffs applied early is a priority, and she has the ability to charge up her skill during cutscenes, allowing us to preload a max charge slingshot. Once released, a few attacks to help build her motor's effect, then straight into an ultimate. This further builds her debuffs and has the added benefit of stun locking the boss, being a perfect opportunity to swap to Alf to unload her shotgun shells, as well as her ultimate in full. Be careful, as the boss will do an unparable charge followed by an attack, so dodge out of the way and spend out the ultimate in full, with Alf single-handedly activating a 5-stack resonance anomaly and building more than 70% invulnerability by herself. Before the Silverdrip generated is fully absorbed by the Reactor, swap to Lauren, using a pursuit attack to gap close, followed by his skill and ultimate for Stagger build. Since we swapped before the ambush point was built, it can now be spent on a swap to Cinderella, activating her motive and catalysts, as well as being just enough stagger to initiate stun. Before using her execute, do 5 attacks, which when coupled with a 5 from her ambush skill, maxes out the motive's attack percent buff and Galena's crit rate. With everything ready, go into an execute, activating the death shred from Alkali and setting us up for an ultimate. Now in the quench state, doing 2 full basic attack strings will build the overheat gauge while accumulating enough resonance for another 5-stack resonance anomaly. By the time the second basic attack string ends, it's better to swap to her skill and quickly build up the rest through it, animation cancelling the recovery frame of the overheat shot with the alternate ultimate. With 5 seconds left and quenched, it's just enough time to fit in 1 more basic attack string. If everything is done correctly, the boss will do an attack right as the final hit connects. Timing can be tight, but it's variable, after which it's waiting for phase 2. At this point, the boss will leave her carriage. As the stagger meter is about to decay in full, swap to Lauren for his ambush attack. Ideally, this shouldn't build stagger, as otherwise we run the risk of building too much. Once the stun recovery period ends, wait for an opportunity to use her skill. The boss here is easily juggled, so wait for her to start an attack before using it. After which, a swap to Cynthia for her ambush skill should knock back the boss, making for an easy setup for her charge skill and ultimate. This should set up for Alf to build vulnerability with her shotgun shells and ultimate, but sometimes the boss gets pushed too far out by Alf's ambush skill, and in this phase aiming can get quite hard, so be mindful. The same applies to her ultimate, with the boss attacking and moving around, so be sure to parry attacks and push for as many flamethrower hits as possible. Ideally at this point, swap to Cinderella. Her ambush skill should not trigger stun, as this is a good opportunity to build stacks for her motive and Galena. As before, execute followed by ultimate. But this time around, the boss's small hitbox means some attacks with, and a faster stun recovery time means damage is rather lackluster, hence why building stacks of 4 stun matters. Either way, try to build as much overheat as possible before the transition to the final phase, where the boss will do a stomp and jump to the middle of the stage, sending out a large damaging area attack. This attack is parryable, but so as to not waste time, double dodge instead, and go straight into Cinderella's skill to max out overheat before the quench state expires to fit in an alternate ultimate. As part of the phase transition, the boss will now ride her carriage on the outskirts of the stage. Hitting her during this period can cause breaks in the carriage which take for ridiculous amounts of damage, so make use of Cinderella's skill to trigger them from range. The stage will fill with lava and the boss will then jump to the middle. This is now a rush to a 3rd stun, so swap to Lauren in via his ambush skill, this time getting the full stagger build and find an opportunity to use his skill and ultimate. Cynthia is up next to reapply her debuffs and, more importantly, use her ultimate. This should hopefully interrupt the boss if she tries to move and provide some cover for Alf, who swapped in by her ambush skill and should be able to build the remaining stagger needed and generate 1 last ambush point with only her shotgun shells. After the full unload, swap to Cinderella to finish things off. Depending on how quickly you stun, she may not have enough ultimate energy ready. A few basics to build buff stacks and an execute should hopefully be enough. The ultimate itself won't hit particularly hard owing to the small boss hurt box, but the high resonance build and burst from the quench stage should lead to a 5-stack resonance anomaly. And with that, the final boss of Silver Palace's first beta dies in 1 minute and 55 seconds. In hindsight, this is quite familiar, isn't it? There's a lot of optimizations on the other bosses which change up how each fight plays out. like doing 2 sets of shotgun shell unloads on Alf when fighting Soulless Lord instead of pushing for a quick stun, as it's possible to 1-stun with a 200% vulnerability modifier. Or using Cinderella's range skill to force out the projectile parry that Rex does mid-Cynthia ultimate. That way, all of Alf's shotgun shells can land without issue. Coming from Zenless, where the most enjoyable content for me is Deadly Assault, which are long-winded 3-minute fights against bosses where proper routing and optimization is key, having much of the same challenges be present in Silver Palace is exactly the kind of gameplay I wanted to see. It's to the point that despite being a very early beta build, where almost everything is highly subject to change, I still found myself grinding out fights. Granted, as much as I've enjoyed Silver Palace, I don't want to glaze it too much. A 1-minute 55 kill was pretty good, but I managed even faster kills by exploiting bugs, like one which kept boss Cinderella locked down and unable to phase transition. And bugs aside, the game needs a lot of polish. In the surveys they have for players to fill out, I held nothing back. It's not evident how most of its combat mechanics function. Vulnerability building is unclear, attribute anomaly damage build and split is unclear, the value of buffs provided by characters is unclear, stagger values on different moves are unclear, the list goes on. The over-the-shoulder camera, excessive zoom, and tendency for the game to forcefully take control of it at times is disorienting and frustrating to deal with. Range weapons are too unwieldy to use with weak recoil and hit feedback, lackluster animation work, and for some characters like Cinderella, only worth using in specific fights. Heck, why have all of this fancy aiming and shooting but no critical or weak points to hit? Movement and skills feel unresponsive, with long input delays for tags, significant ending lag on most animations, excessive knockbacks making it impossible to be consistent, and movement on skills leading to forced repositioning. Parry circles are hard to see and sometimes don't appear at all, made worse by the claustrophobic over-the-shoulder camera with attacks coming from off-screen. And all of this isn't even scratching the surface in terms of feedback, and you can be sure I included all of that and more in the surveys. Yet none of these faults take away from how fun Silver Palace's combat is. Balancing buff, debuffs, and resources, be it through ordered skill use or aligning reactor energy to get ambush skills on the right characters, figuring out rotations so that attacks them off at just the right time, and having the skill and execution to parry, hit projectiles, and pull off a planned route properly. I think this game still has a fair bit of time left before its release, probably a good 1.5 to 2 years, and in that time a lot of changes can happen. But thankfully, the fundamental combat mechanics of this game are solid, which bodes well for its future development. I don't know when the next beta will be, but I'm sure as hell excited for it. Silver Palace shows a lot of promise, and if it isn't on your radar yet, it should be. That will be all from me for now. If you're interested in seeing more high-level gameplay, want to know about niche techs, or even just learn about the fundamental game mechanics for these kind of games, why not like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell? I've got more videos coming. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.